The order came through on a colorless September morning in 1969, the kind that felt hollow even before the day began. I was sitting in the signal operations office at Fort Lewis, listening to the teletype machine chatter out another routine dispatch. The rhythm was mechanical, detached, like the world speaking in code. When the paper finally fed out, I tore it loose and read the assignment twice before folding it. Mission: repair and test Mount Shasta relay station. Duration: 72 hours. Personnel: 3. Classification: routine. Simple words, but they carried the kind of simplicity that hides something deeper. The station had been down since early spring, allegedly from weather damage, ice warping the antenna, runoff washing away the access road. Command wanted it operational before the snow came back. I'd done dozens of jobs like it in mountains, deserts, and forgotten patches of coast where silence was thicker than air. I didn't question the order. You didn't back then. I slipped the folded sheet into my jacket and walked toward the motor pool where the others were already waiting. Sergeant Henry Tate was by the Jeep, cinching the straps on a stack of field packs with the same quiet precision he applied to everything. He was a career man in his 40s, face carved by weather and years of service, steady hands that could coax life back into any piece of equipment. He didn't talk much, but when he did, you listened. The third man was Private Ellis Carter, 31, new to our unit, a logistics transfer with a file so spotless it almost felt incomplete. I've been told he kept a journal. Some men did that to stay steady. He stood a few feet from the Jeep, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the gravel as if trying to read something there. "We ready?" I asked. Tate gave a brief nod. Carter looked up and answered, "Yes, sir." His voice was low but clear. We loaded the Jeep with the usual: radios, batteries, ropes, rations for 5 days, cold weather gear, and a tent sturdy enough to survive mountain wind. The drive south from Fort Lewis took most of the day. Rain followed us halfway, streaking across the windshield in thin silver threads. Tate drove while I rode shotgun, and Carter sat in the back, writing in that little notebook of his with neat, deliberate strokes. The road unfurled through evergreen forests that slowly gave way to rolling plains and back again to heavy timber. As we crossed into Northern California, the air changed, crisper, thinner, with a hint of sulfur from somewhere unseen. By the time we reached the town of Weed, the light had gone copper, and the peak of Mount Shasta loomed in the north like a frozen storm caught mid-collapse. The town itself was quiet, a logging settlement folded in shadow. We stopped at a small gas station to refuel. The attendant was an older man with skin the color of old bark, his movements unheard, his eyes tracking us with the kind of caution that comes from knowing things he won't say. "Army?" he asked, looking over our uniforms. "Yes, sir," I said. "Just a routine maintenance run to the relay station." He nodded, wiped his hands on a rag, and looked toward the mountain, where the summit hid behind heavy gray. "You boys mind your hours up there," he said. "Locals don't go past the tree line after dark." Tate asked why. The man shrugged. "Things go quiet up there, real quiet. Radios stop, compasses spin, folks lose their way. We lost a hunter 2 winters back. Found him sitting on a boulder, staring at nothing. Didn't speak again." His words hung there a little too long. I thanked him, paid for the gas, and climbed back into the Jeep. As we pulled away, Carter wrote something in his journal without looking up. I didn't ask what it was. We reached the service gate near dusk, a rusted chain across a dirt track, a faded sign reading "Restricted Area, Authorized Personnel Only." Tate cut the chain with bolt cutters, and we pushed on until the forest closed around us, the trees narrowing like a throat. We stopped where the road dissolved into rock and roots. That's where we camped. The air was thin and unnervingly still. No wind, no birds, not even the distant hum of insects. Tate built a small fire, and the 3 of us heated rations in tin cans. I set up the field radio, cycling through channels. All I caught was static, soft, endless, like water running under ice. "Signal's weak out here," I muttered. "Always is near the mountain," Tate said without looking up. "Rock messes with the frequency. We'll get better range once we're higher." We ate quietly, the firelight cutting long shapes into the dark. The silence pressed against us like altitude, heavier than the cold. When I finally stepped away from camp to check the perimeter, I looked up and saw the silhouette of Mount Shasta blotting out the stars. It didn't look like a mountain. It looked like something asleep. I felt a dull pressure in my ears, like the air had thickened. Swallowing didn't fix it. I told myself it was just elevation, nothing more. When I came back, Carter was already asleep, curled against his pack with the journal under one hand. Tate lay awake, eyes fixed on the tent ceiling. "You feel that?" he asked quietly. "What?" "The air. It's pressing down." I listened. There was nothing, not even the whisper of trees. Altitude, I said. Your body's adjusting. He didn't answer. I laid down, closed my eyes, and tried to let the rhythm of the fire settle my breathing. But the silence stayed, thick and watchful. It wasn't a kind of quiet that comes from absence. It was the kind that listens back. I remember thinking that the mountain didn't feel empty. It felt aware. And as I drifted towards sleep, that pressure in my ears deepened until it wasn't in the air anymore. It was inside me. We broke camp before first light. The sky washed in that thin gray that makes everything look half-remembered. The air was brittle and cold, the kind that stings your lungs when you breathe too fast. Tate doused the ashes of the fire, while Carter packed the tent with silent precision, his journal already back in the inner pocket of his jacket. We started up the trail just as dawn bled over the ridge, our breath turning to fog in front of us. The forest swallowed us almost immediately, massive trunks rising like pillars, their roots twisted through volcanic stone. The ground was soft underfoot, layered with pine needles and the sweet rot of moss. I led, compass in hand, though the path was narrow enough that we moved single file, Tate behind me with the heavier pack, and Carter last, his rifle swung across his chest. The higher we climbed, the more the forest changed. Sound began to thin out until it felt like we were moving underwater. The usual mountain noise, birds, wind through branches, the occasional crack of ice was gone. All that remained was the sound of boots scraping stone and the soft pull of our breathing. By the time the sun cleared the treeline, I realized I hadn't said a word in over an hour. When I did finally glance down at the compass, the needle wavered left, then right, then spun in a slow, lazy circle before settling somewhere between north and nowhere. I tapped the glass, but it just quivered again. Compass is acting up, I said. Tate stopped beside me and pulled his own from his chest pocket. The needle in his was drifting too. Rocks full of iron here, he said. Volcanic residue, throws off magnetics. He said it like a man repeating something that might be true. We used the old Forest Service markers instead, small orange discs nailed to trees every 100 yards. Most were rusted through, some half missing, but they still caught the light like breadcrumbs. The air grew sharper as we gained altitude. The forest thinned, branches giving way to bare stone, and scattered patches of snow that hadn't melted since last winter. My ears kept popping. The pressure didn't vanish. It only moved deeper, from my ears into my chest, a low heaviness that matched my pulse. We stopped once to drink from our canteens, and I noticed Carter rubbing at his temples. "You all right?" I asked. "Fine," he said, though his voice trembled slightly. We pushed on. Around mid-morning, the tree line broke entirely, and the world opened in a rush of light and distance. The slope above us gleamed with scree and frost, the relay station visible against the ridge like a crooked tooth of metal. From where we stood, it looked small, almost fragile, an outpost at the edge of the world. "There she is," Tate muttered. "Looks worse than the report said." He was right. The antenna tower beside the shack leaned at a sick angle, one leg twisted like it had been struck. The access path was half buried under loose rock. "We'll inspect when we get there," I said. We kept climbing, boots grinding on unstable gravel. The wind came alive again above the trees, steady and cold, pushing against our backs. Carter slipped once and caught himself with a grunt. His face had gone pale under the rim of his helmet. "You sure you're good?" I asked again. He nodded, eyes unfocused. "Just the altitude." We reached the station a little past noon. It was smaller than I expected, 10 by 12 feet at most, corrugated metal walls bolted onto a concrete foundation. The door hung half open, creaking faintly. I stepped inside first. Dust motes hung in the light like slow rain. The place smelled of rust, mildew, and the faint tang of ozone. A radio transmitter sat on a wooden bench against the far wall, its switches corroded but intact. A thick cable ran from it through the wall and up to the tower outside. There was also a small logbook chained to the wall, its pages curled and yellowed. I flipped it open. The last entry was dated March 3rd, 6 months earlier. It read, "Severe interference. Abandoning post. Awaiting evac." That was all. Tate crouched beside the battery away. "Dead, but fixable," he said. "Antennas bent, joints loose. We'll need to brace it before we try to transmit." Carter set down his pack and stood by the door, looking out at the valley below. From this height, the forest looked unreal, flat and motionless, like a painted sea of green. "Hell of a view," he said softly. I joined him at the threshold and followed his gaze. Everything looked distant, but not in the usual way. The valley had no depth, no movement, no wind through the trees. It looked stilled. "Let's get to work," I said. Tate spent the next few hours climbing the tower, tightening bolts, replacing braces, and realigning the dish while I swapped out the old batteries for the fresh ones. Carter ran cable lines and secured connectors with frozen fingers. By the time the sun started its slow fall toward the horizon, the work was done. The tower stood upright again, the panels glinting weakly. We ran a full systems check, voltage steady, signal strong. I powered up the transmitter and keyed the mic. Fort Lewis, this is Relay 6, radio check, over. Static poured out of the speaker, loud, dry, endless. I adjusted the dial. The noise changed pitch, rising and falling in a pattern that almost sounded alive, but no voice cut through. Tate frowned. Try the backup frequency. I did. More static, lower this time, humming like distant engines. I pressed the mic again. Fort Lewis Relay 6, how copy? Nothing. Tate leaned over my shoulder. Everything's functional. Should be clean. I checked voltages, connections, alignment, every readout perfect. The radio wasn't broken, but it wasn't transmitting either. After another hour of diagnostics, we gave up. The sun was sinking, the light turning sharp and metallic. We'll camp here, I said. Try again at dawn. We set the tent near the station, using the wall as a windbreak. Tate started a small fire with the scraps of dry wood we'd packed in, the smoke curling thinly into the still air. We ate our rations in silence, the quiet pressing in from all directions. When I checked the time, it was 1,830 hours. I wrote a brief log entry. Day 1, station reached. Repairs complete. Radio non-functional. Calls unknown. Will attempt contact 06006. I closed the book and looked up. The sky was heavy with unbroken cloud. No stars, no moon. The fire's light barely reached the edges of the clearing. Carter sat near the flames, scribbling in his journal again, his hand trembling slightly. What you writing? I asked. He looked up, startled. Just notes, sir. Observations. Such as? The quiet, he said. It's louder than it should be. Tate shifted his weight beside the fire. I've been on a lot of peaks, he said finally. Never felt one that listens back. I stared at him. You think the mountain's listening? I think it knows we're here, he said simply. After that, no one spoke. We doused the fire and crawled into the tent. The darkness closed in instantly, heavy and suffocating. I lay awake for a long time, waiting for the sound of wind or the scrape of stone. Anything human. There was nothing, only that pressure again. Deeper now, pulsing like a heartbeat I couldn't match. Somewhere inside that silence, I could almost swear the mountain was breathing. I woke before dawn to a kind of silence that felt wrong. The tent glowed faintly from the first thin light outside, but the world beyond it was utterly still. I could hear my own heartbeat and nothing else. Not Tate breathing beside me, not Carter shifting in his sleep, not even the whisper of wind against the fabric. Then, beneath that silence, something began to surface. A low, steady vibration, faint but unmistakable, as if the mountain itself was exhaling through stone. I sat up. Tate was already awake, sitting cross-legged, staring at the wall of the tent with wide, unblinking eyes. You hear it? He asked quietly. Hear what? I said, though I already could. The hum. The word barely left his lips before it filled the air again. Slow, deep, constant. It wasn't sound the way we usually think of it. It was something felt more than heard, a pressure crawling up through the ground into your bones. Started an hour ago, Tate whispered. Thought I was imagining it. Carter stirred then, turning over, eyes open and glassy. It's been going all night, he said. It never stopped. We crawled out of the tent together. The sky was the color of cold metal, the ridge above us shrouded in low cloud. The air felt wet and electric, heavy against the skin. The station looked unchanged, the tower bent but standing. The door of the shack swinging slightly in the breeze that didn't move the dust on the ground. The hum was everywhere now, faintly trembling through our boots, vibrating in our teeth. I pressed my palms over my ears. It made no difference. The sound wasn't outside, it was inside us. Infrasound, Tate muttered, more to himself than to me. Below human hearing. You don't hear it, you feel it. Comes from underground sometimes. Volcanic. You think that's what this is? I asked. He didn't answer right away. His eyes were fixed on the ridge rising behind the station. If it is, it's strong enough to kill birds, he said, but I don't see any dead ones. We went inside the shack and tried the radio again. I switched it on, fingers cold against the metal. Static filled the room, low and restless, threaded through with the same pulse we felt underfoot. I cycled through the entire range, nothing but that slow rhythm humming behind every channel. Fort Lewis, this is Relay 6, I said, forcing my voice steady. Emergency contact, do you copy? Over. Static answered, followed by a faint burst of distortion that made the hair on my arms stand. It almost sounded like a voice stretched and flattened under the noise, but the words were impossible to catch. "Say again," I said, but whatever it was faded back into the hum. "Play it back," Tate said. We had a tape deck recording all transmissions automatically. I rewound the reel and pressed play. The hiss returned, followed by that short burst of noise again, clearer this time. Not words, but a rhythm. 3 short pulses, a pause, then 1 long. Tate counted them out loud. 3 short, 1 long. "That's a V in Morse." He looked at me. "That's not random interference. Could be reflected signal," I said, though I didn't believe it. "From where?" he asked. I had no answer. We turned the radio off and wrote everything in the logbook. Signal anomaly, infrasound, no clear transmission. Then I told them we'd run the equipment again that evening and hike out if it stayed dead. No one argued. The hum didn't stop all day. It got inside your thoughts, turning focus into static. Tate and I checked the tower again while Carter replaced connectors along the cables. Every movement felt heavier than it should have, like the air itself resisted us. Around midday, I found Carter standing still beside the foundation, head tilted as if listening. "You good?" I asked. He nodded slowly, his eyes distant, just trying to find where it's coming from. "Don't think about it," I said. "Focus on the job." He said nothing, but his hand shook as he worked. By late afternoon, the vibration had deepened until it felt like a heartbeat in the ground. I knelt and pressed my hand to the rock. The pulse was real, faint but steady. "Feel that?" I asked. Tate crouched beside me, his expression grim. "Volcanic resonance maybe," he said. "Pressure shift miles below. It happens," but his voice lacked conviction. We ate by the fire as the light drained away. The hum was louder than our own breathing now. It had shape to it, almost language. A rhythm that teased at meaning but never gave it. Carter sat apart from us, his journal open on his knees. I walked over. "What are you writing?" I asked. His hand paused over the page. "What I hear," he said. "What do you hear?" He looked up at me, eyes wide and unfocused. "Words." My stomach tightened. "What words?" I asked. He turned the book toward me. His handwriting was uneven, frantic. 3 words repeated over and over. "Come stay. Listen." I shut the book gently and handed it back. "That sounds messing with your head, Private," I said. "It's infrasound. It can cause hallucinations, disorientation. You're fine." "Yes, sir," he whispered, though he kept writing. None of us slept that night. The hum filled the tent like a current, pushing through the thin walls, into our lungs, our teeth. I lay there with my eyes open, the rhythm pounding through the dark like a slow heartbeat that wasn't mine. Then, around 3 in the morning, it stopped. The silence that followed hit like a blow. It wasn't relief, it was pressure reversed, crushing instead of pulling. My ears rang in the emptiness. I sat up fast. Tate was already awake, rigid, staring at the tent wall. "It stopped," I said. He nodded.
"Yeah."
"Where's Carter?" We both turned toward the empty space beside us. His sleeping bag was open, his boots gone. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped out into the night. The darkness was absolute. No stars, no moon. The beam of the light sliced through it, catching the silver of the tower and the dull metal of the station door. "Carter," I called. No answer. Tate followed close behind, rifle in hand. We moved around the camp, scanning every angle of rock and shadow. The silence was so complete, it swallowed our voices. Then, faintly, from somewhere up the ridge, we heard it, a voice. "Help!" It was distant but clear. "Carter!" I shouted. "Up here," the voice called back. "I can't see." We climbed fast, stones slipping under our boots, lungs burning in the thin air. The flashlight beams darted over boulders, catching nothing but fragments of mist. Then we saw him, 200 feet above the station, standing on a narrow ledge, his back to us, arms at his sides, flashlight lying on the ground. "Carter!" I shouted. "Turn around." Slowly he did. His face was pale, eyes wide and vacant, like he was looking through me. "I heard it," he said softly. "Heard what?" Tate asked. "The signal." He pointed at the wall of rock before him. "It's coming from there." I shined the light on the surface. At first, just stone. Then a thin fissure appeared, barely wide enough for a hand. "There's nothing there," I said. "It's inside," Carter whispered. "They're inside." "Who?" "The ones who stayed." His words made my skin crawl. I grabbed his arm, feeling how cold he was. "We're going back," I said. He didn't resist, just moved like he was sleepwalking. We led him down the slope in silence, the darkness pressing close. When we reached camp, I checked his pupils. They reacted slow, uneven. "He's in shock," Tate said. "Or something worse," I muttered. We wrapped him in a blanket and gave him water. His eyes closed, and he drifted off without a word. I stepped away to the edge of the clearing and looked back up at the ridge. I couldn't see the crack anymore, but I knew exactly where it was. Somewhere behind that rock, the hum waited, patient as breath. At first light, the mountain looked deceptively calm, just a cold spine of rock cutting through cloud. But I could feel that low pulse still echoing under my boots, faint yet alive, like the mountain hadn't finished speaking. Carter was already awake when I stepped out of the tent. He was sitting on a flat stone, wrapping his gear with the same steady rhythm as a man performing a duty he no longer believed in. His face was blank, drained of color, his eyes hollow. He moved efficiently, without hesitation, but there was something wrong in the precision, something mechanical, practiced too fast. "You get any sleep?" I asked. He didn't look up. "Enough." Tate emerged behind me, rubbing his temples, eyes bloodshot. "We heading down?" he asked. I nodded. "Radio's still dead. We've done what we could. Command can send another crew." I walked to the shack, switched the transmitter on one last time, and keyed the mic. "Fort Lewis, Relay 6. Mission aborted. Returning to base." Over. Nothing. No static, not even the hum now. Just absence. Like the mountain had closed its throat. I shut it off and grabbed the logbook, wrote the final entry. Day 3. Station repaired. Transmission failure continues. Interference persistent. Aborting mission. We broke camp quickly. The silence around us was heavy and exact, pressing in from all sides. Even the air felt thinner, reluctant to move. We started the descent, following the trail back toward the tree line. The slope looked different now. Angles steeper, stones looser underfoot. Every few steps I caught myself glancing up toward the ridge where Carter had stood the night before. I didn't see the crack anymore, but its shape still hovered in my memory like a bruise. No one spoke. Around mid-morning, Tate stopped. "You hear that?" he said. I froze. For a moment there was nothing, just a scrape of boots. Then, faintly, the hum returned, distant but distinct, threading through the air. "Keep moving," I said. The sound faded as we descended. By the time we reached the first trees, the pressure in my chest eased. I hadn't realized how much weight I'd been carrying until it lifted. The forest felt alive again, birds calling, branches creaking, wind stirring the needles. Carter stopped beneath the first pine and closed his eyes, breathing deep, as if he'd been underwater for too long. "Better?" I asked. "Yes, sir," he said quietly. "I think I'm all right now." Tate gave him a side glance but said nothing. We kept moving until the afternoon, finally reaching the jeep at the base. The air was warmer here, heavy with sap and soil, but none of us relaxed. We drove down in silence, the forest blurring past in green smears. When we reached the outskirts of Weed, the town looked different too, still and empty, like it had been abandoned. The gas station from before was closed, the windows dark, the pump handles swinging in the wind. I didn't stop. By dusk, we crossed back into Oregon. Tate drove, eyes locked on the road, while I watched the rearview mirror. The mountain disappeared behind us, swallowed by low clouds, but I couldn't shake the feeling it was watching us leave. Carter sat in the back, staring out the window. His hands rested on his knees, motionless, his expression unreadable. When we finally pulled through the dates at Fort Lewis, I went straight to the communications building to file the report. I kept it simple: equipment malfunction, altitude sickness, mission incomplete. I didn't mention the hum or the crack or the voice in the dark. You don't put that kind of thing in a military file. 2 days later, I was summoned to the signals office. A captain I didn't recognize was waiting behind a desk, a folder marked classified signal intelligence in front of him. "Lieutenant Briggs," he said, his tone polite but tight. "We need to discuss your Mount Shasta report." My stomach sank. "Sir, I filed a full account. Environmental interference, communication failure." He raised a hand. "Not questioning your paperwork. I'm here about what wasn't in it." He opened the folder and slid a reel-to-reel tape across the desk. "Your radio unit auto-recorded all transmissions. Standard procedure. We review failed comms for training." I'd forgotten about the recorder. Small, automatic, always running whenever the transmitter was powered. "We had a technician listen through," he continued. "He flagged something unusual." He gestured to a playback unit on the table. The machine clicked, reels turning. At first, all I heard was static, the same empty hiss that had haunted the relay station. Then, faintly beneath it, something else took shape. A pulse. 3 short bursts. A pause. 1 long. Over and over. The same pattern Tate and I had logged. "That's the V sequence," I said. "Morse code." "Correct," the captain replied. "But listen to what follows." He fast-forwarded the tape. The pitch deepened. The static thickened until a low vibration emerged from underneath. It wasn't random. It had tone, rhythm, a slow breath between pulses. "That's not interference," he said. That's a voice. The word struck me harder than it should have. I listened closer. At first it was impossible to make sense of. Then the captain slowed the playback. The vibration stretched and deepened until a single word slipped out of the noise, distorted and hollow. Down. My throat tightened. I'd heard that sound before. Not from the tape, but out there on the ridge, in the middle of the static. There's more, he said. He advanced the reel again and pointed to a mark in red pencil. This section, recorded at 0247 hours, September 23rd. That's the night your man Carter went missing. He pressed play. The hiss returned, followed by the crunch of footsteps over gravel. Slow, deliberate, coming closer to the mic. Then a voice, Ellis. It spoke softly, almost tenderly, but it wasn't Tate's voice, and it wasn't mine. There was something off about it. The cadence too measured, the tone too flat. It sounded human, but only just. The footsteps retreated, replaced by a second pair, lighter, hurried. Carter's. He followed it, I whispered. The captain nodded. We think so. But followed what? I had no answer. The tape clicked to a stop. We're sending another team, he said finally. Full equipment survey, soil samples, seismic analysis. They'll be there a week. You'll brief them before departure. Sir, with respect, no one should go back there. Noted, he said. But the decision's made. We need to understand what caused those anomalies. He paused, studying me. Did you or your men see anything unusual? Structures, markings, anything that could suggest the human presence? I thought of the fissure in the rock, the blue glow Carter claimed to have seen, and the silence that felt alive. I should have told him. Instead, I said, no, sir, just stone and fog. He regarded me for a long moment, then nodded. All right, Lieutenant, dismissed. I walked out of that office knowing exactly what I'd done. By keeping the truth off record, I'd handed another group of men to the mountain, and part of me knew it had been waiting for them. 2 weeks after that meeting, they sent the second team up the mountain, a 6-man unit under Lieutenant Marcus Novak. I wasn't invited to join them, only to brief them on terrain and equipment. I stood in front of them in the briefing room, a map of Mount Shasta projected on the wall, my mouth repeating facts my conscience refused to say aloud. I told them the altitude, the coordinates of the relay station, the path through the timberline. I didn't mention the hum. I didn't mention Carter's journal. I didn't mention that the silence on that mountain could make a man feel like he was being watched from inside his own thoughts. Novak was young, late 20s, sharp uniform, sharp eyes, sharp confidence. He asked if I'd encountered any geological instability near the ridge. Only loose scree, I said. Nothing unusual. He nodded like he believed it. They left the next morning with twice the supplies we'd carried. Generators, floodlights, seismic gear, portable weather sensors. Command wanted data, something measurable to explain what had gone wrong. I watched their convoy pull out through the fog, 6 silhouettes fading behind the wire gate, and I felt the same pressure in my chest I'd known up there, a weight that had nothing to do with altitude. For 2 days, they checked in as scheduled. Routine reports, station secure, equipment functional, weather clear. Each transmission was logged with perfect clarity. On the 3rd day, Novak reported low-frequency vibration detected, possible infrasound resonance. He said it was disorienting but not dangerous. The phrase "not dangerous" stayed in my head like a splinter. On the 4th day, the transmission schedule was missed. Command waited an hour, then 2. When the next window came and went without contact, they scrambled a rescue team out of Beale Air Force Base. By the time the team reached the ridge, the sun had already set behind the mountain. They made camp lower on the slope and ascended at first light. What they found the next morning never left the reports, but I read them later. The camp was intact, tents zipped, gear stacked neatly, food rations untouched. The generator was still humming. The radio sat on the workbench inside the shack, tuned to the correct frequency, indicator light glowing green. The logbook was open to a final entry in Novak's hand. Day 4, 14:30 hours, hum increasing in intensity. Crew reports headaches, confusion, Carter's notes accurate, recommend immediate evacuation. No signature, no follow-up, no men. The rescue team spent 3 days searching every ravine, every drainage, every shelf of rock within 5 miles. No tracks, no blood, no discarded gear. It was as if the mountain had inhaled and they had gone with the breath. One of the searchers, Sergeant Paul Diaz, reported something the official summary buried halfway down the page. About 300 yards above the ridge, he found a patch of ground unlike the rest. Dark, almost charred, 12 feet across. The soil was brittle, as though burned from below. At its center lay a single depression, shallow but precise, shaped like a footprint but far too large. nearly 3 feet long, 4 toes visible. Diaz took photographs, logged the coordinates, and returned to base. Weeks later, the prints and the negatives went missing from the archives. When I read the final report, the language was sterile, detached, training accident, multiple casualties, environmental exposure and terrain hazards, bodies unrecovered, closed, sealed, forgotten. But not by everyone. Within the Signal Corps, the relay station earned a quiet nickname, Silent Ridge. Orders circulated quietly. No missions after September, no solo operations, no overnight stays. Repairs would be daytime only, brief, supervised, and never near the upper slope. The silence wasn't policy, it was superstition written in bureaucracy. I received a copy of the report in early November. I read it alone in my quarters under the flickering light of my desk lamp. 6 more men gone, erased like mist. I thought of Carter muttering, "Come stay, listen," of Tate staring into the fire and saying the mountain knew we were there. I thought of the tape that whispered down. Every part of me wanted to believe there was an explanation, a tremor, a gas pocket, a hallucination born from pressure and fear, but the pattern was too clean, too deliberate. I opened my own journal, the one no one else knew about, and wrote a single line beneath the date. They weren't taken. They accepted the call. When I closed the book, the room felt smaller. The base outside was silent except for the hum of the overhead light, a sound so low I almost didn't notice it until I did. I turned the lamp off. The hum stayed. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept hearing it, the faintest vibration under the floor, a ghost of that same pulse from the mountain. I told myself it was just the base generators, that the sound had followed me in memory, not in body. But as the hours crawled by, I could feel it moving through me again, slow and patient, like something remembering my name. Around 2000, I got up and worked to the window. The barracks outside were dark, the rain steady, the lights of the motor pool glowing dim through the mist. Everything should have felt safe, grounded, ordinary. It didn't. There was weight in the air, like before a storm, but heavier, more deliberate. When dawn came, I went straight to the mess hall, coffee shaking in my hands. Tate was already there, hunched over a folded newspaper, steam rising from his mug. He looked up at me, and I saw the same hollow exhaustion in his eyes that I felt in my bones. "They're gone," he said quietly. I nodded. "I know. You read the report? Every word. They didn't die up there," he said. "They disappeared." He said it flatly, like a mechanic describing a broken part, but his knuckles were white against the cup. "Command will bury it," I told him. "They already have." Tate's gaze drifted past me toward the window. "I saw something that night," he said after a long pause, "when we were looking for Carter. You never mentioned it. Didn't seem real enough to mention." His eyes were distant now, remembering. It was standing above us on the ridge, thin, tall, darker than the rock around it. Thought it was a tree until it moved. The fog swallowed it a second later. My chest tightened. "Why didn't you tell me?" He shrugged, a slow, tired motion. "Because I didn't want to believe it. If I'd said it out loud, it would have been real." We sat in silence for a while, the only sound the clatter of dishes somewhere behind the counter. Finally I said, "Something lives up there." Tate nodded. "Something that doesn't want to be found." We didn't talk again after that. 2 weeks later, I heard they'd decommissioned the station. The official reason was environmental instability, whatever that meant. I thought that would be the end of it. Then, in late October, a civilian contractor from the Geological Survey filed an anomaly report, low-frequency tremors near Shasta Ridge, non-seismic, repeating, constant. When I read that phrase, I knew the hum was still there. It hadn't stopped. It was just waiting. Life at the base went on. New assignments came. Old ones faded into paperwork. But every few nights, when the world went quiet enough, I'd hear that faint pulse again. Not from the ground this time, but from inside the walls, as if the mountain had followed me home. I tried to ignore it, tried to bury myself in routine, but silence became the enemy. I couldn't stand the stillness of a room, couldn't sit alone without the radio on. The other men started to notice. "You all right, Lieutenant?" they'd ask, and I'd smile, say it was nothing. Just fatigue, just the weather. Tate transferred out in November, volunteered for a post in Oregon. Before he left, he came to my quarters with a small brown envelope. "You should have this," he said. Inside was Carter's journal. "You kept it? Someone needed to." His voice was hoarse. "I don't want it in my house. You understand?" I did. After he left, I opened it. The pages smelled of smoke and wet paper. The last entry was one I hadn't read before, dated the night he vanished. They spoke through the hum. They showed me the way in. I almost went, but he pulled me back. They're waiting for someone who won't turn around. I shut the book and locked it in my drawer. That night, I dreamed of the ridge again. The same blue fissure glowing like a wound. The same figure standing in the light, tall and faceless, its hand raised in invitation. When it leaned forward, the world shook with that same slow rhythm, and I could feel the word again, not spoken but pressed straight into my skull. Down. I woke gasping, the taste of iron in my mouth. My watch read 0247 hours, the exact time Carter had walked into the dark. I sat there until sunrise, unable to move, listening to the silence hum. By then, I understood something I hadn't before. The mountain doesn't take men by force. It calls them, and some part of them chooses to go. It doesn't matter how far away you get, it never lets go. Tate was right. Some mountains are better left alone, but not every man is built to ignore a call. Some of us hear it forever. 23 years later in 1992, I was long out of uniform and living quiet when I heard Mount Shasta's name again. It came from a news brief about a researcher at the National Archives, a woman named Dr. Ellen Marks, who is studying declassified Cold War communications projects. She'd found a file stamped Environmental Anomaly, Restricted Access. It was the relay station dossier. I remember staring at the television, the hum starting again in the back of my skull, as if the mountain had been waiting for someone to say its name aloud. That night, I dreamed I was back on the ridge, standing before that same crack in the rock, blue light spilling out like breath in cold air. When I woke, I turned on every lamp in the room, just to push the dark back. Months later, I read that Marks had gone to California. She hiked up to the site herself, alone. The report said she reached the shelf after 2 days and found only the concrete foundation left. The tower was gone, dismantled years earlier, but the ridge was still there. She wrote later that she felt pressure in her ears, increasing with proximity, and that a low vibration began just before dusk. She left before nightfall. Her paper came out the next year, Infrasound Phenomena and Environmental Disorientation in Remote Installations. Academic, clinical, cautious. It mentioned Mount Shasta only once, in a single paragraph about psychological resonance and isolated topographies. She never published on the subject again, but people kept going. In 2004, hikers near the ridge reported hearing a low hum after sunset. One of them, a man named Thomas Ryland, broke from the group, drawn uphill by what he described later as a signal that felt like memory. They found him at dawn, sitting on a rock where the station used to stand, staring into the fog. He didn't speak for 3 days. When he finally did, all he said was, there was a white inside the mountain, blue, like something alive. The Forest Service sealed the area afterward, citing geological instability. But the real reason never made it into print. The files were marked restricted, federal monitoring required. I still had Carter's journal by then. I'd read it so many times the ink had begun to fade where my thumbs pressed the corners. I told myself I'd destroy it one day, but I never could. It felt like the only proof that any of it had happened. When the news about Ryland broke, I opened the drawer and read the last page again. They said, stay, listen, come back. I won't. The lines still look wet, like the paper remembered his hand. I closed it and sat there until the light changed, until the hum faded again. Years kept passing. Tate died in 1982, retired and living alone in Oregon. His neighbor found him in his chair, radio on static. Carter didn't last much longer. Medical discharge, psychological trauma, Ohio. A reporter tracked him down in 2006 for a piece on veterans. Near the end of the interview, she asked about Mount Shasta. According to her notes, he went pale, stood, and said, I went inside, not then, since, in dreams, every night. He told her, they're still there, waiting for someone who won't turn away. She never printed that part, just kept it in her notebook. I think she was afraid people would believe him. In 2018, a geological survey recorded low-frequency vibrations under the ridge, identical to those we'd logged in '69. The lead geologist wrote that optical distortion was observed above the fissure at 1900 hours, consistent with heat shimmer, though ambient temperature did not support such conditions. Her recommendation for further study was ignored. The ridge remains closed, but locals still talk. They say when the wind dies and the fog rolls down, you can feel it through the ground. A hum more felt than heard. The people of Weed close their windows, turn their radios up, pretend it's nothing. But they know, the mountain listens. In 2019, a small package arrived at the Army Heritage Center in Pennsylvania. No return address, Only a note inside. This belonged to my father. Preserve it. No explanation needed. It was Carter's journal. They archived it under Cold War psychological stress studies. A graduate student found it years later while writing her thesis. She read it over 3 days until the ink patterns began to blur. The final entry filled an entire page. I woke walking, boots on, light in hand. The hum pulled from the inside, not sound but gravity. The crack was smooth, black glass. Blue flame deeper in. I wanted to step through. Then a voice behind me, his voice, said my name. I turned and he was there, waiting. I went back down, but I still hear them. They said, stay, listen, come back. I won't. She photocopied the page, returned the journal, and never mentioned it again. Sometimes, she told colleagues later, when the library was empty, she could swear she felt the floor tremble. As for me, I never set foot near that mountain again. But even now, when the world falls quiet enough, I can feel it, the hum moving under everything, the rhythm of something that never stopped. I know what it's saying. It's been saying it since 1969. Come back. And somewhere deep beneath stone and ice, the mountain is still listening for an answer. If you've made it this far, you already know. Some places don't forget, and some stories don't end. Mount Shasta still stands, wrapped in fog and silence, and the Army still calls it environmental interference. But the old signal operators know better. They've heard the hum, they've felt the pull. Maybe it's still calling for the next one who won't turn away. Until then, keep your radios tuned low, your mind open, and your distance from the ridge. Because the mountain is listening, and it remembers every name that answered. This is Captain Rebel, signing off. Like, share, and subscribe for more classified war stories they never meant for you to hear.